All right. Good morning, everybody. It's Dan Bouchard. Thank you for joining us on the Virginia broker required training for August. This is our required training, and that we are obligated to provide to you as the licensees. It is the agent responsibility and obligation to participate in this kind of training on a routine basis, and so your presence here today is documented. And so you're now satisfied after hearing the entire presentation. You'll be satisfied with the obligation. All right, so let's jump into the scenario that we have. This is a real life scenario. And did somebody say something? Okay, I thought I heard something. All right, there's a real life. This is a real life scenario, but the facts have been changed and the names have been changed to tweak for privacy and for um, consistency of the presentation. All right. So buyer agent Bonnie did a final walkthrough with buyer Bob on the $800,000 house he was purchasing and found two GFCI outlets that hadn't been installed as agreed upon in the home inspection. Bob was upset and wanted to know how he could force seller Susie to complete the work. Susie refused, stating that Bob could walk away from the contract but would lose his $20,000 earnest money deposit. Bob discussed the situation with broker Bill and legal counsel Larry. They all agreed that Susie had breached the contract, but Larry asked Bob if he was sure he wanted to pursue this. Bob insisted he was willing to die on this principled hill if Susie wouldn't comply. Larry and Bill advised him to consult his own legal counsel before deciding not to go through with the settlement, especially since the contract required settlement to happen by the end of the day. Bob faced two choices. He could accept the minor issue and handle it himself after settlement and get the property he wants and move in and move on with life. Or buyer Bob could refuse to go to settlement because of Susie's failure to fulfill her obligation, which in turn could lead to potentially losing his earnest money deposit, potentially losing an unpredictable litigation or arbitration battle, being held liable for any damages not completing the settlement. So here are some takeaway questions. Did Susie materially fail to perform? If anybody wants to throw their opinion there. Anybody wants to throw out an opinion?
You use the word materially.
So if she was supposed to put in the GFCI and they weren't put in, the answer is yes.
Yeah. Anybody disagree with that? Okay. What leverage do you think that Susie has as the seller in this kind of situation?
Not much.
Yeah. So Susie's leverage is she can bluff or potentially bluff and posture herself with leverage to assume that the buyer's just going to roll over and agree to it, right? Because the buyer's obligation and the buyer's leverage exists only up until the moment that the property is finally settled and the funds are transferred. So the buyer has the leverage to correct this issue up until that moment of settlement. So Susie could probably try to bully her way through this if she wanted to, and she may get away with it. So is Susie's refusal to fix the electrical issue a leverage tactic? I would say it probably is, right? She's exercising some leverage because she believes that the transaction that the buyer's just going to cave in on it because the buyer has needs. They got to move in. They got to be, they've set up this whole transaction, and they want to get on with their lives as well. And Susie's banking on the fact that the buyer's just going to cave and just agree to accept the property and settle on it. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. But Susie's probably banking on that. Could Susie's strategy here backfire on her? And if so, how could that backfire? Anybody have any idea?
Yeah, the buyer could walk away
Yeah.
and say, all right.
I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to settle. Right.
He may have had another interest with another house, and this might be his way out.
Yeah, exactly.
The buyer could sue Susie. Yeah. And then we had that question previously of does that take the property out of being on the market or not? We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what leverage does Bob have in this situation? He bought, one of the things is what what
all of his money.
Yeah. So Bob is the buyer, so he would have the ability to not perform on the transaction if he wanted to, and that would really screw over the seller. So keep in mind that the buyer's greatest amount of leverage exists during the last amount of time that, for a situation like this, the buyer's leverage is greatest just immediately prior to settlement. So if you've got any settlement issues to debate, the buyer has the most amount of leverage immediately prior to the settlement, because they hold all the cards. And if the seller hasn't if the seller hasn't performed, then they could exercise their right to challenge the seller and to say, we're not going to perform because you didn't specifically do XYZ. So does Susie's failure to perform justify Bob's refusal to settle? I think the answer to that is probably it might. It might and it might not. Both parties are playing a game of chicken in this situation, believing that they have leverage to win.
Default if he doesn't show up to closing.
Well, would he be in default? Would he be in default if he doesn't show up? If the seller had failed to specifically perform on the GFCI, and he points to that as being the seller's default, and Bob refuses to settle, is Bob actually in default?
I believe he is.
Well, is there any degree?
But yeah, he is most likely in default because he still must show up. But the question really is, if she does not do what she was supposed to in terms of specific performance, what are the remedies for that? What does the contract say is the remedy?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and that's a good question. A lot of this is not terribly clear. If the seller doesn't do what they're supposed to do, I would argue that that's a material fact of the contract. Now, granted, it might not be a wise thing to challenge the seller in a situation like this, especially over a small issue of two GFCIs, right? It might not be a smart thing to do because a judge could throw this out, or an arbitrator could rule against Bob, or could the arbitrator or a judge could rule against Susie, and they could the point that I'm trying to make here is that when these things go to court or go to arbitration, the things like this can flip on a dime, particularly when a judge or an arbitrator hones in on a specific fact. If the arbitrator or the judge is honing in on the fact that the seller defaulted first, and therefore that's where the default is, then the buyer could be off the hook. But conversely, if the arbitrator or the judge goes ahead and rules that no, the default of Susie was not substantial enough, then that could also be a ruling, and it really could flip on a dime, and it could be somebody's the arbitrator or the judge's mood that day.
Right.
So do you really want to risk that for an issue like that? Now, if you had an issue where there was, this is an $800,000 purchase, and you've got $50,000 worth of damages or repairs that need to be done, that might be a different story.
Shouldn't Bob show up and perform, but have his walkthrough form note this defect and request a remedy alongside it, and that becomes
or ask for a credit?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Or the agent step in and take care of it themselves.
Yeah, those
save the deal.
Those are all possible solutions, but let's not read into the scenario. Let's not consider those options for the moment. Yes, those things are all possible solutions. But in terms of just thinking about Bob and Susie, just Bob and Susie, and the performance thereof, and what could happen. The point of this discussion is to say that things could flip on a dime depending on the judge or the arbitrator's mind, and you could end up with a discussion, with a scenario that is not what you expected. And so that's where I'm trying to drive this whole conversation. The outcome guaranteed for Bob is not the outcome is not guaranteed for Bob. The outcome is not guaranteed for Susie, regardless of how strongly they feel about their positions. And for that reason, it's important to understand that really it's all a game of leverage, and who's going to playing the game of chicken, because they believe that they have the right posture to exercise at this moment. And maybe they'll win, maybe they won't. The lesson here is that disputes in real estate can be very unpredictable and rarely have absolute clear answers. Playing hardball with perceived leverage can lead to unpredictable outcomes, and both sides may end up unhappy with the results.
Can I ask a question about that, Dan? This
Yeah.
is Debbie. So, I mean, they did the walkthrough, say at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the repair wasn't done. Doesn't the seller have until 5 o'clock where they wouldn't be in default? So the agent's running around, got the electrician there. So, he's pissed off in the morning at 9, but it is fixed by 4.
Yep.
So then the seller performed.
Yeah, well, if the seller performed, but let's assume that the seller didn't perform and wasn't going to perform. The whole point of this is Bob is entrenched in his opinion, and Susie is entrenched in her opinion, and they refuse to budge, and they're not going to budge. They're
going to die on the sword.
Yep, they're going to die on the sword.
Dan, can I ask a question too? This is Kevin. I think an attorney told me the answer to this last week. So my question is, are you going to give the answer, or do you want me to tell you what the attorney said?
Just go ahead. Let's hear it.
The attorney said, and I'd have to go back and get the sentence, but that language about the material, like the material part of the contract, if you do a home inspection addendum, she said that you have to add a language, and at the end of that addendum, it says these remedies are now a material part of the contract. You have to make it part of the main contract with that language. And that if in your scenario right here, if that Bob guy goes and those aren't done, he has to settle if that language is not on the addendum, or Bob will be in default. And that was what she was telling me.
Yeah. And that's one attorney's opinion about it.
Right.
And then
Susie, I wonder if she knows about the case though.
Well, I know. But so let's assume that this attorney that you talked to is Bob's attorney, for example. But Susie has another attorney who has an opposite opinion of that.
Yep.
And then they're both duking it out. and then the decision has to be rendered, but either by a court or an arbitrator or some other entity. Somehow it gets resolved. And the point of all of this is it depends on what that judge or that arbitrator feels that day. It could flip on a dime. It's totally unpredictable. Yes, the one attorney says one thing, the other attorney says another thing. They both have valid legal arguments, and at the end of the day, it's going to be who makes the decision on this. It's either the arbitrator or the judge or the parties. And that's the whole point of all this. So nothing is ever clear. Nothing is ever absolute, regardless of if one attorney says this on this situation and another attorney says it on this. That's their job. They're making their professional opinion on it based on who they're talking to. But the reality is it's a crapshoot. We don't know.
And that's when we tell people, consult an attorney before you make this important decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why if we stand on our own hill and dictate to say, oh, you'll win this or you'll lose this, that's a dangerous position to be in.
Yep.
Right,
I have
but
a question.
Dan,
Sorry.
the only thing I was going to say is, but I think we should actually have an answer when this comes up and what I heard last week, because if we're the ones writing the home inspection addendum and we're not making it a legal binding part of the contract, then it's a little bit of our fault for not adding that sentence that she recommends adding.
Well, yeah, I mean, that part. Yeah, I would agree with that part. Absolutely.
So we can't always, you can't like at the end go, oh, sorry, go consult an attorney. What if they consult an attorney and they say, Kevin should have written a sentence on your home inspection addendum as you were negotiating?
For that.
Well,
right.
Why wouldn't NVAR have that be among all those clauses that say, no other things change and this and that? They have some boilerplate at the bottom of that contingency release addendum.
And I also thought that any addendums written against a contract became part of the contract, period.
Yeah, me too. Right. Me too.
So that would be my umbrella in my argument. And
I kind of think I agree with that myself. And I would have to ask that attorney that Kevin was talking about exactly what they mean by that.
If the attorney looked at the entire sales contract before they looked at the actual addendum and only the addendum.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, that's glad.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Kyle.
But that's a great point, Kyle. That's an excellent point. But the question that I have is, would it, if you have it there also in that addendum, usually, I'm not going to use the word protected because, like you said, it all depends on the judge. But if you have it there, even though it's also already in the written contract, wouldn't that help more than?
Oh yeah, it sounds like it would help. Sure, absolutely. And I don't think it would hurt.
I mean, everything we do on a contract after the fact becomes part of the contract.
Yeah,
and if that wasn't the case, then why bother?
Yeah, I would, and that to Kyle's point, I would want to talk to that attorney that Kevin was talking to dive into what their logic was in saying that,
and how deep they looked into the whole package, not just the addendum.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey guys, it's Jim. I'm sorry I came in late, but first of all of our addendums have the phrase "the parties agree." That makes it a material part of the contract. That attorney might want to be adding that sentence, but it's overkill. Secondly, this is why it's so important when you write these addendums, you have to identify what you want fixed, how you want it fixed, by whom you want it fixed, by when you want it fixed, and what happens if that deadline is missed. If you put all of that in there, then if they are in breach, then there's already in the contract what happens.
But isn't that already part of the ICRA itself?
It is.
Who, when, how, time, all that?
No, not the specific details. The specific details are not.
Yeah.
That's, and that comes into play, especially when you're going to install like appliances and stuff, right? Like if the seller says install a new range, well, what does a new range mean? Is that the new range that was purchased at the secondhand store, or is it a range? Is it a
like kind should be written into it for that point, but
exactly. But that's the key. That's the key there. Being more specific is what I think Jim was saying.
Right. You got to
Jim,
put,
I was gonna,
and there has to be a deadline so that when that deadline comes, and it's got to be far enough ahead of settlement so that everybody can look at it and say, well, they missed the deadline, and today is day 6 before settlement, and now the buyer is entitled to X, whether it's cash at settlement or credit from whatever. But that deadline and what happens if the deadline is missed is really important, because that gives the court the teeth to say to the seller, no, you agreed to this. So now we're going to give the buyer $2,000 to cover the cost.
That's almost, exactly. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It almost seems like when we write the ICRA, we should also include in that when we plan on doing the final walkthrough and make that the deadline.
Yeah, you can put whatever deadline you want to in there, because again, the phrase is the parties agree, blah, blah, blah.
but the deadline, is it by default, not settlement?
No, well, if you don't put anything in there, then yes, you've established.
And that's another key thing. As soon as the property settles, the buyer has lost all their ability within the contract.
Correct.
To address or to negotiate or to fight the seller or to get any kind of reaction or get any kind of cooperation from the seller. At that moment of settlement, they've lost all that opportunity. So
you've lost the leverage, but does the walkthrough form with a remedy still remain part of the contract and needs to be performed by the seller?
At that point, the contract is gone at that point. The contract is no longer relevant after settlement.
It dies at settlement.
Yeah. Right. And so now the parties could sue each other in court and say, you were supposed to do this, and this in the contract, and you didn't do it. And then they could sue over that.
But it's not worth it for 2 GFCI outlets. You know, exactly. That's the part of all of this that I would go back to my buyer, if it was my buyer, and say, is it worth all of this to get 2 GFCI outlets? It's going to cost you potentially 30 times more than 2 outlets.
Yeah.
Right. That's why if you put the deadline and the details in there, then you call your buyer and you go, hey, look, they breached. They're not going to fix it. It's a week before settlement, but you're going to get $1,000 cash from the seller. Let's just take care of it after. And then a non-issue goes away.
All right, great.
It can be a really big issue, though, with new construction, where the guy says, I can't get your drainage right in time. I'm waiting on the county to tell me how to fix what they, didn't approve. And here you want to go to settlement and everything's teed up, and you can hopefully rely on a builder warranty or something to straighten it out. But it gets a lot trickier when you can't just throw $100 at 2 GFCIs.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and we could go into another 100 million what ifs in this scenario, but I think you all get the point that the buyer's leverage ends at settlement, and trying to address these issues after the settlement is not our job anymore.
Okay.
And it's not our job after. Now, we may want to try to do what we can to help the client, but really that's not our job anymore. Our job ends after the settlement.
So that walkthrough form really doesn't provide a buyer any level of protection, assuming they actually move forward to closing.
It does in so much. It does in so much as it gives it starts the negotiation on the settlement date, for example, to say we need to fight over this stuff. We need to resolve this before we settle.
But for example, if you wrote in X, Y, and Z wasn't addressed, seller needs to credit $1,000 and seller signs that.
Yes, that would be one possible solution. Yeah.
But that remains valid. That does not die upon settlement.
Caitlin, I'm going to add to that one that the lender needs to approve that $1,000, and now
exactly.
Yeah.
And then
that could delay settlement.
We can go down a lot of rabbit holes on this. I don't want to go down all of the rabbit holes. So, but I do want to just raise the point that the buyer's leverage ends at settlement. Once you've settled, you've lost all your leverage, and you don't really have any way to fight it other than go and sue the other party in court.
Right.
And that's not our job to coach our clients through that.
Should our ICRA include? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I have a
What-
question of what
this-
Debbie said.
Yeah, this question, and then we'll end the conversation. We'll stop with the recording, and then after that, we can continue the conversation for those who want. Go ahead.
Me, Donna. So
Yeah.
my question is what Debbie said. They have till 5 p.m. to remedy a situation on day of closing. I've never heard that before.
Well, they have
Well,
closing, right?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, by default, the title companies only operate during their operating hours, right? It's not likely you're gonna get a title company to do a settlement at 9 o'clock at night.
oh, I see. I didn't realize. I thought she was saying like we're at the table at 10 a.m. and we close, and then they have till 5 p.m. to fix it. Okay,
No.
I get it.
Yeah. All right, great discussion, folks. I love the energy in this. And we'll continue the conversation after we stop this recording. And the conversation, and okay, yes, I do